The second item on our agenda, consideration of approval of meeting minutes from July 9, 2024. Those are in your packets. Do I have any comments, questions, corrections you'd like to offer? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve.
Motion.
Thank you, Kristen Kilgore.
Second.
Clint Thompson with a second. Thank you. Roll call. Thanks, Casey. Brian Blundell is not here. James Buxton. Yes. John Conrad.
Yes.
Phil Frame.
Yes.
Bud Brown.
Yes.
Marcus Jones.
Yes.
Kristen Kilgore.
Yes.
Cujo.
Here.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. We haven't yet had a meeting that one of us had messed up that. Jay Lemon.
Yes.
Caleb McCaleb.
Yes.
Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
Josh Moore.
Yes.
Todd Overdeen.
Yes.
Craig Perry.
Yes.
Brandon Rader.
Yes.
Jill Raines.
Yes.
Richard Wright.
Yes.
Michelle Schaefer.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Kristen Strecker.
Yes.
Brett Town.
Yes.
Clint Thompson.
Yes.
Marty Watkins.
Yes.
And Todd McKenna says yes. All right, thank you for that. Item number 3 on our agenda, discussion and consideration of bill levy and term between authorizations. When we left last week, we said we're going to come back and the 2 items would be the same 2 items. And so this afternoon I was sitting in my office, I thought it makes more sense to do it the other way around, and I thought that's ridiculous because everybody's got an idea as to which way to do it. So we're right back where we were. As you know, we have a wonderful slide that shows the general idea as to the dollar amounts of millage numbers based on the number of years. That's that slide right there. We can make it larger, even better. Keep in mind, these are ranges, and things fit within there, and it does, I think, assume Chris said a 2.6% ad valorem base growth, was it 2.6? 2.5. 2.5, thank you. Ad valorem growth number for the ad valorem base. The idea, what we'll get to in the next item, as you know, of course, is how to spend the money or what the budget number is for the overall projects. Keep in mind, inherent in that is the discussion of what percentage is unidentified funds. So those are the 3 factors that are right in front of us. And so I think we've had a good dialogue up until now. I don't think that means we won't have a great dialogue tonight, but I do think we need to really get serious about this number and its impact on the next agenda item. So with that in mind, I will entertain a dialogue or discussion with respect to comfort levels with the budget or the project funds identified. Clint.
I was looking this over, spent a lot of time considering things, and I probably I'm thinking about that the splash pad number 3. It's only used 4 months out of the year. It's nice to have. I watch the kids play the ones we have now. It's very enjoyable. But I think that for me to be towards fire station number 1. That's needs some redone, and then possibly move some funding from maybe the overlay to in there to it's over a period of time, and they already have $5 million a year budget. A period of time where they can actually get that second fire department done. Because being a first responder all my adult life, I can tell you, unless you're the fire chief over there, or a fireman, or been a fireman, or a cop, you don't really realize how much those guys do. And cops normally tease the firemen and all that stuff back and forth, but it's a real thing. I'll go to a building after an armed suspect, but I'm not going to go in a building on fire, and they do. And they also respond to wrecks, medical treatments, get grandma off the floor, they do all kinds of stuff, and I think we need to get the fire station number 1 reconditioned, ready to go. It's closer to the east side, and that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Clint. If it's okay with everybody, what I'd really like us to do with that agenda item number 3 is see if we can come to a consensus with respect to the mill levy and the term, and then go into the items specifically within that budget and number. So, Josh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm just throwing this out, I'm 200 million, and it may even be 200.5 million, but I'll tell you why I'm at that number. I've got 10 road projects, 5 quality of life projects, and 1 fire project. But the reason why I have 10, and I think what would get us to probably 230 or so, would be more road projects. I want this first bond to be achievable and go well. I want it to be manageable. And 10, a road project is a lot of work to our staff and the city of Edmond. And 10 over 10 years, a 10-year bond at $200 million, that's a lot of work to do. These are big road projects. And so I'm really, I wouldn't vote against, 12 or 13 or 15 road projects because we need them all. But to me, I think 10 is realistic to get done.
Caleb, yes, sir.
What's the minimum contingency we can do?
The minimum contingency? I don't know that there is a minimum. Is there, Kathy?
0.
Yeah.
The most you can do is 30%. If you're talking about unlisted money, the most you can do is 30%.
And we've got $57 million in unlisted money.
Well, if we go back to where we were last week and look at it, if we want to do that, then we can, but you all each may have gone back and looked at your own project listings and come up with something different. I think the main thing is the staff, I think, would be comfortable at about 15 to 20% contingency. I don't think they even would necessarily need more than that. So, but it could certainly go lower. I do think you start getting some risk associated with that for things that come up that weren't expected, or just unplanned events, changes in priorities. You just never really know sometimes.
We're talking about bond fund contingency. They have contingencies in their budgets too.
Right.
We're almost at 50%.
Yes, they have contingency in each project. So I think going to 15% or so of unlisted money and not thinking about that as a contingency, it's really for projects that come up that you need money to do and you don't have it anywhere else. And so you could use those funds for it. Or if you get to near the end of the program and you want to add another year of street overlay, for example, you could use that street unlisted money to do some extra overlay. If you've used up the $35 million, let's say, that was in the listed project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Robert. Yes.
Robert is
Richard, sorry. You're the Department of Labor Services.
overachieving.
I remember you from the Clinton administration.
That's I think 7 years is the right year, amount of years that we could show progress without committing ourselves to a longer term thing. And I think 200 million is a good number as well. I don't think you want to go out 10 years on the first one. Just given that that's a long time period for people to digest.
Kristen, yes. And then Joe.
I'm more towards the 10 years because we know that those are conservative numbers and we're probably going to end up at the 7 to 8 year. 200 million I think is fair between the 154, 231. If we're trying to do a 15 mil levy, I think based on where we ended last week, that 231 budget, we have plenty of wiggle room.
Yes.
And so we might end up somewhere in there. So I would be comfortable with the 15 with the 10 year.
Thank you. I appreciate your input. Joe?
So I looked at the numbers and tried to decide between 10 and 15 mil. And so I looked at the difference for a $300,000 home and even double that for a $600,000 home. And it comes out to about 160 for a $300,000 home, which is about 12, 15 bucks more a month for that homeowner. If you got a $600,000 home, the difference between 10 mil and 15 mil is about 25 bucks a month. And you can't even get a pizza for that these days. But you look at what the city gets as far as being able to improve everything from roads to parks, and it's huge. And you know, I'm concerned about us leaving money on the table. You know, when I see it, if I saw the ballot measure and it said 150 million or 200 million or 230, those numbers are almost meaningless to me. I'm really just gonna try and figure out, okay, what am I gonna be liable for on my tax bill? And like I said, if you've got a $600,000 house, 15 mil is about 80 bucks a month, less than $1,000 a month. If you got $1 million home, you're about a little bit more when you got $1 million home here in a minute. So again, I think that we should just go big. I think we should just go for that 10-year, 15 mil and get this stuff done. It's kind of like remodeling the house. You know, we've got an older home here and it needs a kitchen upgrade, it needs the bathrooms fixed, the HVAC's going out, the windows. So we just kind of start, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna do the kitchen and wait to see what happens with the HVAC. You know, we're just gonna be putting patches over everything. So I'm for getting everything fixed. You know, if it takes 7 or 8 years, great, but we should kind of plan on that 10-year bond, just so we have those kind of funds.
Thank you. Jack, made your hand up, I think.
Yes. Steve, I've got a question for you. Do you have a feeling on 7 or 10 years in order for this to get passed, money start coming in, and your staff and under your leadership start showing progress to the point where we'd be happy to take this renewal back out to the citizens?
Yeah, I mean, so what I'll say is that we've started up staffing up our engineering group and getting more people kind of involved into this type of work. I think as far as city staff goes, I think we're in a good position. I think as far as the projects we have listed, a lot of those are either we already have preliminary design or we have, so a lot of the ones that were ranked higher, we've got project readiness points because we've got preliminary design, we've been through it. A lot of the ones that are kind of intersection safety and capacity improvements, we've got a study already going on those, that we got some federal funds, we anticipate getting federal funds. That's why those are only $3 million a piece, there'll actually be more with federal funds. So I think from a staff point of view, in the very beginning, we may, have a program manager that helps us get some contracts underway. I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at staff-wise to be able to handle, whether it's over a 7-year time period, or it's a 10-year bond over a 7 or 8 year time period. We should be able to get everything. It's always the first few years, right? That's the hard part. We've got, we can do resurfacing then, we can do certain projects that we've got aligned and kind of ready to get some quick wins. So there's always that startup piece that we had the same thing when we went through water and wastewater. We had a huge master plan, $1 billion master plan. Getting started on those projects, we've been through this before with that, so we know what to expect, we know how to, and that's one of the reasons why these are in the order they're in, is because of project readiness points as well.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Rick. Thank you. I was kind of looking at this in terms of just the regular voter out there. I think number one, they know their taxes are going to go up. Number two, they want to know what projects they're going to get for the money. I'm not talking about the tax rate, I'm just talking about what projects are they going to get for the money. And that's obviously a critical part of it. I don't think it's going to make any difference between 10 mils or 15 mils. Taxes are just going to go up. And I think 10 years in order to get the dollar amount to make a difference. That's what came down to in my mind. How can we make a difference in that? And $230 million, we can make a difference. 150, we can still make a difference. But it gives us the ability to go to them with a good list of projects, knowing those projects are going to get done. And it's going to benefit the community. So I guess the bottom line is, I'm in favor of 15 mils and the 10-year term for around 230 million.
Thank you, Rick. Brett, go ahead, bud. Then I'll ask Brett a question in a second.
Okay, because to me, it's the list of projects that's important.
Okay.
And if it adds up to 200 million, then so be it. If it adds up to 220, then so be it. Then we need to decide if it's going to be a 7-year or 10-year. And it's all perception to the tax, the taxpayer. I'm going to go in and look at the list. I'm going to see what's on there that I want, that is going to improve my life. And that's what I'm going to vote on. I'm not gonna, like you said, that number's not gonna mean a whole lot. They're not gonna know that that project costs $22 million, and they'll question, oh my gosh, that costs $22 million for that intersection. Well, yeah, it does. But I just think we need to get that list, and it needs to be as good as possible, and leave all the things that really don't need to be on there.
Okay.
For the next round.
I want to ask Rick, at the end of last meeting, you made a comment about one number's the same as the other based on the term of the bond.
Sure.
Would you elaborate on that? Because I'm concerned about interest carry and other silly stuff. I'm also concerned about increasing everybody's ad valorem tax, regardless if Edmond got it before, by 15%, given the fact everybody's insurance went up by 60 to 80% in the last year. And then the idea that when they get their bill this next year, there's a perception that maybe that's a concern. If they look at it regardless, my mom's 82, fixed income, I think, Mom, your taxes are going 15%. I mean, that's an issue at some level. But that's just me editorializing. Rick, I want to hear what you said the other day about this.
Well, what I was just making the point is 7-year at 156 million and 15 mills is the same as 10-year and 231 at 10 mills. It's just the time difference. It really is. I mean, you can have, because you're only going to do those first 7 years anyway, and then you're going to be voting on another bond. So it really is the same. If you want to think perception-wise, we're only going to do 100 years. We're only going to put it out here for 7 years at first. Once one passes, I have fully confidence in the community to continue to pass it. It's just getting the first one passed.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Chris.
To add on to that, so you're saying, is it, if we do every 10 years, at 7-year mark, we'll take it out again to the voters? So if we do a 7-year term, does that mean in 4 years?
I think I'd let Kathy speak to
Yeah, no,
how the city's done it as an example.
Yeah, I think what you have to keep in mind is that the projections that these numbers were built on was a 2.5% growth in assessed value each year. Edmond has actually achieved closer to 6% or 6%. So these numbers are extremely conservative, which is what your bond counsel and your financial advisors are paid to do for you. So, you want them to be that way. So what would happen in this case is you would set your mill levy target at 15 mills. And as you get, in each year, they'll do a calculation, figure out how much you can sell to fill up that bucket to achieve a 15 mil levy for everybody. If assessed value grows faster than 2.5%, you will get through the authorization more quickly. You'll sell the bonds more quickly. So you might start working on the next bond issue, in about 7 years, maybe even sooner, if it were a 10-year time horizon. If it were 7 years, it's not as variable, you don't have as much time, so it could be at like 5 years. But you'll just use up your authorization, and then you'll want more bonds to keep that 15 mil levy limit from a city management perspective, so that people's property taxes don't drop way off and then they go back up again. I think that, I think that these projections are just really conservative, so we have to keep that in mind.
For example, the last 3 years, Oklahoma County's had a 17% increase, a 13% increase, and a 6.079 this year. I think it's going to become more normalized, in the next year or two. And there's so much gap between fair market value and taxable value right now that, you can have bad years where property values go down and people's taxes are still going to remain the same.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get this huge fluctuation.
That is one of the good things about property taxes, is that they are very stable. I mean, it takes like a catastrophic event like the 1980s to make property values go down in Oklahoma.
Just a question. Jane, why we pull up the slide that has the current list of projects that boxes checked by them, and so we can kind of at least have a visual, like Bud said, of the numbers. So this is in the spreadsheet, and Clint, I hadn't forgotten about it. This is in the spreadsheet that was sent out in your packet, of course. You can see the box checked on the left. These are the 12 items plus picking up down there the Coltrane widening of $4 million, plus the quality of life items, plus the Veterans Memorial and the fire station, which are not exclusive to that. Would you slide over just a second, please, Jane? So that list of items is 173 million, I think is what that says. If you added a 20% contingency of whatever that would be, 34,600,000, you'd be roughly at 210, right? Is that my math right? Something like that? 216, thank you, Michelle says. So just as a frame of reference, Bud mentioned it a minute ago, doesn't mean we're set on either one of them, but that's the number that was up there last week. After, now, does that show the removal of Cobell and Penn?
Yes.
So the number that's the scenario total, those are the identified funds, correct? The 170, whatever that number is.
173.
173, thank you. And then the question that Caleb asked about contingency related to the amount of funds that are not identified. So that 231, remember, that was just a starting point. That's not anything other than what we started with as just a frame of reference last week. So the number I would encourage you to pay attention to is the scenario total, which are the box check project items, plus whatever contingency you may be thinking would get you to a number if we use that list. That was just for the reference. Clint, you had a question?
I was asking Kathy, say we recommend the 10-year, 15 mil bond, and say in year number 8, everything's done. Can you end the bond and then start a new one, or do you have to run that one out?
You would have, so what people vote on is an authorization. So just think of it as like a bucket. And you're gonna sell pieces, parts of the bucket each year. By year, in your example, by year 7 or even 6, you're gonna pretty much know how many more sales you could do before you exhaust that authorization. So you'll start planning for the next one, a year, 18 months in advance, hopefully. And your city staff is always putting together a list of capital improvements. They're not gonna stop capital planning.
So when we say 10 years to the public, it could actually end in 6 or 8 years.
Right, and I don't think 6, but I think it could end in.
Well, I mean, I'm just using those numbers.
Yes, yeah.
Say realistically 8 years.
And that's why I think you really, when you talk about this, you talk about the mill levy target. We're targeting 15 mills. We have $230 million worth of projects identified. We think that will last us about 10 years, but it could be less than that.
Especially if they build more houses and get more.
Especially if you build more houses, yeah. Maybe build some more commercial projects also. They're not as limited on assessed value growth.
Jay, Buxton?
Okay, I think I'm going to try to put up a rock shield here because we get ready to. I'm concerned about the city of Edmond with unallocated, unrestricted cash money in their budget that they just don't have any idea of what to do with. If you take 70% of the projects we've identified, it means there's 30% unidentified. 30% times 230 million. Be $69 million worth of unallocated money. Pull the screen back over to the left, please. On the right-hand column of the projects that we've talked about identifying, I went through those, and I don't think it's fair. I picked out a different number for the cost of those projects, but those numbers aren't fair either. Those are their best guesses. I think there are $61 million worth of overpriced projects on that list. And I may be off 5 million, darn it. But I'm saying 61 million on it. If you take that and the 69 million of fluff that's already in the bond, that's $130 million of money that the city of Edmond says, oh, we haven't been told what to do with this. We don't have any restriction. Which means that if we go to the voters with a $231 million bond, 130 million is unallocated, and about 100 million is for projects. I find that embarrassing. because of that, I think the answer is what Caleb is kind of warming up to saying. And that is, can't we allocate about 90% of it? And I would add, stick a citizens oversight committee on the extra or the overage. So that way we have some trust and confidence that the city's not going to go off and have a total or something. Here come the rocks.
No, I don't think it's any rocks. I mean, I think I would just say, I think you made the assumption that all of the errors in the numbers are to the benefit of the city's excess. And I don't think that's, well, maybe it's objective. I don't know if that's accurate. But I hear what you're saying, Jay. I appreciate your insight always. Kathy, you will say something?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say something about this, what's identified on here as contingency, and then we start calling it unlisted money. And it can't be used on just anything. It has to be, it will be unlisted street money, unlisted parks money, unlisted fire money, and you have to spend it on streets, parks, or fire. You can't use it to go, you know, I don't know what some crazy thing with it. You know, I think the other thing is, yeah, I hear what you're saying about the project estimates, but I also know what I'm hearing from the construction community and what I see in Oklahoma City projects and projects in Chickasha and Perry and all these other places I'm working. Nothing's coming in on budget, and prices for construction are continuing to go up. And your staff has tried to build some price escalations in there to respond to what could be a 10-year bond issue and make sure that you have enough money in there. But if there is excess money left over in even one of the listed projects, it still has to be spent on street projects, if it's a street project. You can't just go and take it and spend it to build a new animal shelter or something. Even if you need an animal shelter, you can't do that.
We were told last week that ACOG is funding up to $7.5 million. Is that the number?
That's a max.
That's the max.
So that's not the, go ahead, Jay.
And it's not guaranteed. And what I heard Steve say last week, basically, is that if you're really patient and want to wait for ACOG and ODOT for 10 years, you can get some of that money. But if you have problems today that need to be addressed, you may not want to wait on ACOG.
Okay, well, if you took 6.5 rather than 7, and you took that times 10 years, $65 million. That we're getting back on those things. So,
but you may not get any of that.
Well, that's right. The sun may not come up tomorrow, too.
Well, I think
we have for the last 30 years.
Well, I think there's a fair assessment. Steve talked about the idea, and I heard you, Jay, and I still hear you, the idea that if you did a project 10 years from now, you're not going to do it for the same dollars you're going to do it for today. So if you want to use your $6.5 million extrapolation, that's tough to keep up with when it comes to the cost of doing that. And I'm not arguing with you at all. I just think it's reasonable idea. And one other thing I'll mention before I call Kristen is I have an item on the agenda tonight about number 5, additional recommendations and presentation to the council. So your comment about oversight committee, I think, would be appropriate if you'd like to make that when we get to that part of the agenda. I'm sorry, Kristen Kilburn.
Well, I just kind of agree with what you just said too, and I want to make sure that we focus on what we're being tasked is kind of a shift in how we fund our city. And I don't want to get lost in kind of some of these details of how it gets executed. It's more the philosophy of we're asking the voters to support a GO bond, a new way to finance additional projects specific to roads, quality life, and public safety. And if we focus on that, I think we can get a lot of support. And then how the city manages it, that's up to us as the concerned citizen and our council members to really stay on them and focus on that and executing it to what we have them given them permission or support to do in regards to the bond. So I want to make sure that we kind of stay on that focus of the philosophy around what we're doing here.
Thanks, Kristen. Keep in mind, at this point, Hardy raised his hand first, but the idea is the mill levy and the term. So numbers are probably as important as anything to discuss right now. Hardy, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to echo, and I appreciate all the points, and I recognize the first time out, this is a new tax. After that, it never will be again, and it changes the trajectory of our community. And I think everyone around this table has said that every week. It sounds like we're close to general agreement that 15 mils is a good number to go for. And I think people are getting comfortable with 10 years because they see the need in these projects and the reality that we all probably believe we're going to get there sooner than 10 years. And so the reality is, this is a way to put Edmond on par with peer cities in the metro area and around the state to be able to fund quality of life issues that everyday citizens experience. Every road, every park, every trail, everything that citizens talk about being important. In addition to education, I understand that's critically important, but I think, I mean, it feels to me as if, and if somebody feels differently, I invite you to throw a rock at me too. 15 mils, 10 years gets us closer to what we're all thinking. And I appreciate the point, but I've seen it work. I've seen it work. And you can't just take that money and abscond and go do something else with it. There are no trips to the Cayman Islands or anything like that. It goes for streets. It goes for parks. It goes for trails. It goes for all important fire stations. So I just think we could talk this thing to death, and I'm not trying to be mean-spirited in saying that, but 15 mils, 10 years, peer cities, list of projects, we all kind of seem to want the same things. Are we close, or does somebody strongly disagree?
Thank you, Hardy. I've got 2 or 3 hands over here, so then we'll take a, well, no. Let's have these 3 comments and take a breath for a second and then kind of see where that is. Clint, Richard.
I just want to ask Steve a question.
Sean.
Him or Sean?
Clint, Richard, Sean.
Okay. How many times have you seen the price of asphalt or concrete go up unexpectedly? I mean, like maybe double.
This last year. This last year.
It's kind of a continuous thing. So it's kind of a continuous thing. I will say, 10 years ago, our water wastewater master plan, you know, we said we've got this many projects, we put in a 50% contingency, and it came nowhere near covering what it needed over the last 10 years. So on the contingency point of view, we think the 30% is kind of right on what it'll be for the next 7 to 10 years, kind of hitting a midpoint with that. Construction cost estimates. Construction costs over the last 100 years have averaged 4.7% increase. It goes up higher than CPI every year. So over the last 100 years, it's 4.7%. Over the last 6 years, I would say our costs have doubled on most of our construction. So we hope it's not going to do that in the future. We're projecting kind of a flatter growth over the next 6 to 10 years, but it'll continue to grow.
And that's your contingency in your numbers, not in our unidentified funds, just to make sure we're all speaking the same language.
Yes.
Richard?
I was just going to say, to the point of the contingency fund, isn't that one of the variables we need to look at too? Because I think 30%.
Absolutely.
I think 30% is way too high. But 15% based on the recommendation that Kathy had seems to be reasonable, and it's similar to what other cities are doing. And that way we'll know how much would go to roads, you know, quality of life and public safety.
That's exactly one of the things that's on our list, so yes.
Okay.
Sean?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, so I have a comment, and then you want to talk numbers, so I'm going to give my comment first. I have family in Tennessee, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and they ask how we fix our roads, and they ask how we build our parks, and I always tell them it's sales tax revenue, and they look at me like I'm absolutely out of my mind. So this is, we're not asking the taxpayers in Edmond to do anything crazy, right? I mean, it seems to me like this is how everybody does it. So now I'll talk about numbers. When we look at what we have in this up here, I'm looking at it because I'm old and I can't see it up there.
We're all acting like we can see that.
you guys are all looking at it and asking the person next to you what the numbers are. We did research on this for a reason, and the research came back that the citizens in Edmond said roads were the #1 priority. And so we have here $57 million remaining why wouldn't that, and to your point, Kathy, I would say we would put that money in unlisted roads. And that's how we designate it. And then we take that to the voters, and they know that, hey, we're doing all these great things to make Edmond a better place and a better city. And by the way, the unlisted part or the unallocated part is going to go to roads. So we're not only fixing your roads, but your roads are going to even get better. So I feel like these numbers that we have here are good. We just haven't allocated the remaining number.
Okay, so by proposition type, you're limited to no more than 30%. So if what I would suggest is that you actually list, if you want to add some money to this scenario, you're going to have to add some listed projects because you couldn't do 57 million, and I don't think.
Kathy, that's 25. Is that 25%?
I was 4%.
Of just the streets?
So you've got 103 million in streets, and if you had 54 million, that's about almost 50%. You couldn't have 50%.
Oh, so you can, okay,
that's what
so
I'm saying.
it's
That's
per
what I'm
category.
saying. Yeah. I couldn't see the numbers.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So
I
you have
misunderstood
to
that.
be 30% by.
Yeah, Kathy.
Okay.
Alan's here, and obviously Brooks. Would you just mention how the ballot item lists the gross number per?
Yeah, each ballot title, amount of bonds, X amount, and then we have to list under that ballot title 70% specific projects. We can leave as many as much as 30% unlisted in each of those categories. You can have 85% listed in one, 90% listed in another, and 70% listed in the third proposition. So it's a per proposition designation.
But it seems like
minimum 70% has to be identified.
It seems like we want to list more, right? I mean, people reading the ballot, if they want to see what's in this for me, the more we list, the more likely they're to say, oh, great, okay, there's something I was looking for. I get leaving some unlisted might help us kind of swing funds in that particular category. But again, our first task is to get this passed, and I think we want people to see as much as they can what they're getting for their tax dollar.
Thank you.
We probably want to go up to 15%.
Go ahead. Bud Grant?
I agree with Berkeley. I think we're really close. I think all we need to do is go back to this list and add a few more projects and we'll be complete. I think that's all it takes.
Jane, can you slide us back over to the left side of that screen, please? The last thing I said before we left last week is if you want to talk to your council persons or your mayor that appointed you, if you have specific items on this list, this is where we would start. I think there might be a comment from Parks on the splash pad number 3. Yeah, Brad, you want to talk to that?
That one we've been kind of talking internally. That was kind of an idea. We just opened a new splash pad. They're popular. They activate a park immediately. I think we need to have a location for that park, right? Like we have to name the splash pad at this park. I don't think we're quite ready to do that, to name which park. So I've got a list here of about 20 playgrounds that are over 20 years old. So I would recommend moving some of that money just to try to keep it within parks. Maybe you guys can talk about other things, but from the splash pad number 3 to the neighborhood park playground replacement, we estimate like $400,000 to $500,000 for a playground. That can fluctuate depending on what you do and improving ADA access and things like that. But just an idea for you to consider.
So are you saying right now we have $2 million on the box check for neighborhood playgrounds, and are you saying you'd like us to consider moving the $4 million under splash pad number 3 and eliminating that and moving those dollars to neighborhood park?
Yeah, even if it was $3 million moved to the neighborhood parks and $1 million somewhere else or cut out, we could at least do 10 playgrounds in the community, and that could be all throughout the community that everybody can enjoy. They're fairly straightforward projects.
Do you have the ability before November to identify which specific projects at playgrounds and neighborhoods they would be?
Yes.
Yeah, he's going to have to do that probably by August 12th.
Yeah, I didn't know if
I got it right here.
I didn't know if it had to be Claygren Park or Fink Park, or it could be this.
Yes.
I'll make a general comment, is the village has done a couple of GOs on issues, and their projects were split, if my memory is correct, I did it, if my memory is correct, between the streets and parks. And parks was, they did 2 rounds, so they went to the voters a second time. And parks projects were very popular, and they were, if you were familiar with the village, the neighborhood parks, they went in and they had a tennis court, they fixed up the tennis court, basketball goals, they put it in playground equipment. It was very popular to the point the voters came back and voted another round.
Well, I'd recommend that we take the whole 4 million and put in park improvements in.
The total 4?
No,
Jamie,
it's
can you,
total 6.
can you adjust it doesn't change the gross number, but does anybody have a serious objection to eliminating splash pad number 3 and adding that $4 million to the neighborhood park playground replacement item? Anybody? Any concern? All right, thank you, Jay. If you do that, at least we'll clean up our spreadsheet as to that.
But is our ballot going to be 10 pages long?
No, I think we're still, it's
If we list every part?
If you're going to list the parks you're going to do, generally what you're going to do, those parks, but it won't be too complicated.
can't imagine the parks any more than the roads. We got 12 road projects.
I mean,
Right now.
that's 70% language. You know, over in the city, we have multi-page ads in the newspaper to get, because we have to publish all this stuff. I mean, that detail is published, but the length of it is part of the deal.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Thanks, Richard. Yes, ma'am. Michelle, sorry.
There was a citizen comment emailed to us about considering the intersection of Covell and Santa Fe, which isn't currently on our list. That is a scary intersection.
I found that one particularly convincing.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't know what put the Covell and Western above Covell and Santa Fe, because that is outrageous.
Can we check that box and see what it can slide over?
Well, let me mention one thing as we're mentioning the input from the citizens, and I appreciate you here tonight. Thank you for coming back. We have at the bottom of our program, our sheet, or our spreadsheet, 6 or 7 items that came from this group at the very first meeting. If you look at them, they're somewhat ambiguous except for a couple of them. And so I don't want anybody to think that those were not looked at, and if there needs to be dialogue about those, I thought it might happen at the second meeting. Nobody brought anything up, which doesn't mean you can't. But in light of what Michelle said, I think, Steve, you might speak to the question, and then if anybody has any strong conviction about the items on the list below the spreadsheet, please bring those up, because they're not forgotten. They have been looked at cursorily, at least by the staff. So I'm sorry. Thank you, Michelle, for
So I'll say, kind of related to the Covell and Santa Fe area, thought it was a good comment that we got. Can't really compare safety-wise a stop-controlled intersection to a signal intersection. Signal is always going to have more accidents. But it does bring up we do get a lot of comments. We do get a lot of citizens' comments. Council Member Peterson gets a lot of questions about access to Mitch Park. I would say that, traffic-wise, we did a temporary project out there to kind of get the traffic to work. It is an awkward intersection, though. I'll give it that. We had, we've got really close to the road. We've got some, guardrails that have been crashed into a lot. The one northbound, we've got it on video as a drunk driver went right in the middle of it. It did its job and saved the guy's life. That's what they're for. But I will say, kind of, looking at that project, I wouldn't replace Western and Covell with it, but I would look at, say, for instance, like Coffee Creek Road and Broadway. It's very even with that one. I would say that the one at Covell and Santa Fe, probably with the voters, would probably get higher on the ranking because of its proximity to Mitch Park and with as many people that want to get to Mitch Park. So I would say that.
Josh asked for us to check the box at least. Janie, do you mind doing that? Again, just keeping a tally here.
So that's 16% unlisted?
Am I seeing that right?
It's
Okay.
total.
And what criteria is
That's not.
That would be Cobell and Santa Fe. So the one, in case you couldn't hear, that we just checked the boxes, Cobell and Santa Fe intersection improvements is number 15 on the staff ranking if you go by the most recent tally, and it's $20,050,000.
I can confirm that it's asked for a lot around benchmark.
I thought I saw a lot of hands up right before that. Yes, Jay, Buxton, and Kristen, sorry. We'll let Kristen go first, please.
Well, I was just gonna make a comment when I sat back with these projects last week. I think the proportion of streets to quality of life isn't quite right, and we know streets are what is the voters really want. So I'd like to see that we are adding more street projects to that. I mean, the way to balance it, either remove quality of life to keep the number the same, or you add more streets.
James, can you zoom in on that number right there? Yeah. Yes, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, ultimately, that's, my comment is I feel like we need to add more streets projects or remove some quality of life projects depending upon the budget and where we want to set the budget limit. I do think the public has heard that Cobell is going to be the next thoroughfare, and they see bits and pieces of it, and they use the bits and pieces that are really pedestrian friendly, and they really like that, and then they get to those pieces that aren't. And I do think there could be a decent PR campaign that could be put together about connecting that stretch. So I do support adding more of the widening of Cobell projects in those intersections. So this Santa Fe is one of them. I think that's a good one. I think Brian, Coltrane, all of those. I think there's a good argument there for the public.
And so here, our scenario is that you've got twice as much streets as you do parks, and then of course 9 for the fire facilities, okay? Other comments, thoughts, specific to millage rates, times, and the whole package? Jay Buxton.
We went back on the far left of the city, we went down and we added, I forget what number.
Number 15, I believe.
It's Covell and Coltrane.
You spoke about it.
Covell and Coltrane, which is in there at 42 million.
Yeah, that's the one after the second meeting. Steve didn't think it was, well, go ahead.
We didn't add that one.
And we put that in at 30 million rather than 42.5.
Now, I think, you want to remind us, Steve, what we said about Cobell and Coltrane after the first meeting, I think, or certainly not later than the second one?
It just seems impossible to build. I mean, it's a tough. If we go for federal funds, we have to raise it above the floodplain. We have to build it a certain way, right? My thought is looking at Cobell and Coltrane and looking back at it and kind of going into it and looking at what we can do. We've looked at it from a whole. We've looked at it trying to break it down into bits and pieces. That's as small as we can get it as far as a federally funded project to try to get federal funds. We need to go back and take a look at that and look at it and see if we can do interim improvements. So it could be something that we just kind of gradually each year add a turn lane. There's not a northbound left turn lane. I think we need to add that. We can start gradually incorporating things. So it's not just going to stay there with nothing happening to it. We will use some funds to make it more functional over time. And as developments come in and grant right away, that makes things easier too.
Yeah, you may remember Kristen Kilgore at the first or second meeting mentioned she really wanted that in there. Can we break it up? And then Steve went back and sharpened his pencil and came back and felt like it wasn't much that you could do. And I'll just say, selfishly, I represent the golf course, and you guys want to take the pond on the north side of the road, and that's going to be a fight, right? So that's not happening in the next 2 to 3 or 4 years. I mean, we know that, right? I mean, that's a fair assessment. Well, we know it already. Shocking, this is not the first time Steve and I have talked about this project. I represent 3 landowners. You can hit a soft 7-iron and hit all 3 of the properties, and none of them are on board yet, right? So.
Well, my point with respect to putting that on is that project was promised to voters in the year 2000, actually in the window of that. So it's probably been on the board and hinted or wished or, oh yeah, we'd really like to do that, most of 30 years. And this is the last time for the next 10 years we're going to be able to do this. This is our last chance. So I think we ought to take something.
Can I ask a point of clarification on your point? Sure.
improvements along the way would make a difference. Citizens would see that. It would become incrementally safer, and it would not eat up the significant portion of streets to one. So, I would that be?
That's why I'm saying move it down from 42 down to 30.
Well, what I heard Steve say last time, or 2 times ago, was you could do some signalization improvements and add 5 to 7 years to it from your rating system is what I'm pretty sure he said.
Yeah, that's what it said. Basically, what we've done out there is bought 5 to 7 years for traffic, for people not to go crazy with traffic. 5 to 7 years out, traffic is going to be a nightmare there, and we'll be right back. So if we're looking at a 10-year period, it might be good to look at including that in somewhere.
If this passes and you have 20% unrestricted funds, some of those dollars could go to that project or wherever the staff feels the hot button is, right?
I think so.
I mean, so I'm, after watching our state legislature and our DOT decide who's going to be in charge of picking road projects, and watching powerful legislators in southeastern Oklahoma get more than their fair share of road funds and promising to the DOT, I've become a huge fan of letting the engineers choose where the hot buttons are. And I'm a big fan of trying to leave as much unlisted funds in this project as possible and trusting our staff and holding them accountable to go out there and know 6 years from now what's hot. I mean, we can guess in here. As Jay's pointed out, we're talking about projects that we're talking about 20 years ago. Well, we don't know what the next 6 is going to look like, but I bet you we could take a pretty big swing and get close to caught up. And maybe the next bond issue gets to do some forward-thinking things. And that's my feelings.
Okay, I have a few questions.
Please.
Well, I think I want to join Artie with the 15 and 10 years. Can the unlisted funds go toward listed projects if they if they come up over budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Okay. And the projects that we don't pick, it doesn't mean they just go away, right? Like they will still be, on the list. The CIP and other funds will go toward them. So we have to keep in mind that if we don't pick them, that doesn't mean they're cast out and never looked at again. So.
Yeah. Andy mentioned, Andy on here? Yeah. Andy, I'm glad you asked that question, Kristen, because he mentioned the interrelationship between the CIP and this. And there is a great opportunity to explain it because it's almost a concern that you're double dipping, right? Not a concern, but that's without a clarification, the perception might be that way. So if you're going to speak, you're going to speak.
Oh, sorry. What do you want me to go ahead and speak about?
Well, what Kristen just asked about, these projects aren't going away, and how you manage a CIP in light of, if funds come in for a project that is on your CIP 2-year, 5-year list, how do you manage all of that?
So, I mean, we talked about, and I think we sent out that if this were to move forward, then there would be some funds that would be freed up within the CIP, right? And so, I think it was $13.5 million would be freed up based upon where you all left this meeting last time, and I know that was just a draft, but that would free up $13.5 million.
So would you continue to work on this priority? Like if we go up to 11, the next project for CIP is 12?
Yeah, we can keep working through priorities, yeah. And again, we heavily rely on the council strategic plan each year to sort of help allocate dollars.
So,
Marcus,
you said you'd be working through priorities. Is this list considered priorities, or do you guys have like another list that is a priority that we don't know about that you can reallocate those funds to?
This list is priorities. I mean, and there are things that come up. Just for an example, like Pelican Bay, which is a great facility, but it's 20 years old. And so that's a facility over the last 2 years that's really gotten more on our radar. So that's a $7 million project.
So you'd be able to allocate some of the funds to something else that might come up as an emergency.
Yes.
I've heard a couple of recent directed comments that 10 years and 15 mils. We're close to a break, so I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes to see if we come to a resolution related to that idea. So please discuss concerns about that idea that Kristen mentioned and Hardy mentioned.
I so move we vote on it.
Did you want to talk about
Thanks.
the list below that we're asked to add to the list? Do we want to discuss any of those?
Well, my reaction to that is really just that. Reaction is, I think that would be appropriate on the next agenda item, which would be picking the projects. Unless you felt, that's all I was thinking about.
Gotcha.
I'll second the 15 million.
So we're saying that Clint Thompson made a motion at 10 years at 15 mils, and Caleb McCaleb seconded that motion. And now I think we need to entertain any additional discussion related to that. Yes?
We need to pick an unallocated number.
I think that's second to that.
I would do that as part of the project listing discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, that's a great question.
No.
You're gonna get a chance to vote, but you all have some chance to chat, so right now's the time.
Put up the slide with the other cities and other grids. No, I'll just say that, we are right there reasonable with most of the other cities around the area out here, and our decision comes down to, again, Edmond's a great place to live. It's the reason we all moved here. It's why we're on this committee. But, if we go less than that, we could be a Midwest city or a lot, and, 2 garden spots in America.
As a 5th generation Comanche County person, I'm taking excessive around the shady 580, just so you know. So thank you everybody for your comments. Any other, yes, Brandon Rager, please.
I've got a question for Marcus, if there's any new revelations from the schools.
I've had no new revelation.
Okay.
I think I've been asked every meeting, but I've been.
Thank you. Yeah. Other comments? Yes, Michelle.
So I think you're going to have 2 kinds of people at the ballot. You're going to have people who are going to vote no on any tax, no matter what, and people who voted no on a hotel tax that they will never pay. And then you're going to have people who say, we want nice things, they have to pay for it, and they're not going to go, gosh, if it was only 200 instead of 230, I'd support it. They're just going to look at the list of projects and go, we want this to be a great community. So I think we go big, just to get everything done. I think they're going to look at the list of projects, and they're going to say, the ones who are going to vote are going to support this, and there's something in it for everybody. So I wouldn't get wrapped up with the numbers. I think we give them the projects, and they'll vote for them.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
I'll add to that, a lot of people that I've been talking to is, it's the projects. If I know that it's going to be followed through with, I can see the progress, I do not care, because it's something that I have to do to take care of my community, and it's my responsibility to do so. So as long as they see the projects, they're good. That's what I've got.
And there's education about it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. You had your hand.
I'm comfortable with 15 mils, 10 years, because I think every one of the projects we have checked, I think it brings voters. If there were a couple of projects on there that this has to pass for the whole thing to happen. I think every project we picked so far brings voters and different voters. And so that makes me comfortable with the bigger number.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second, and last call for any additional discussion.
I will say, I'm more comfortable with the 7. And, if I vote no, it's just for that. I'm one of these people that once we make a decision, we all vote yes, we all vote no, that we all come out of here and we're all supportive of it at that point, and that's what I would be. I was a little reluctant at first to be on here, but these are projects are really needed. I have full faith in the city to get these projects done. I wouldn't mess with their budgets. They're the experts in these, and I think with the contingency that we have in their budgets and otherwise, that there's a good chance that these projects will be fully funded and won't have to be reduced at some point to meet the requirements of the bond issue. So just wanted to let you know where I stand on this and one of the reasons why it's the first step.
Well, I appreciate your friendship more than anything, but nobody in this room has more experience of implementing bond dollars than Brett Town. We first met, he was in charge of building everything that Edmond had, and so he's a faithful superintendent. So thank you for your wisdom and your insight. So. All right, no more discussion now. I'll call the roll for vote on the motion at 10 mills for 15 years.
No, 15 mills for 15 years.
Thank you. So that's full training, wasn't it? All right, thank you. 15 mills at 10 years. Thank you, everybody, for your gracious correction. All right, Brian Blundell is absent. James Buxton. No. Sean Conrad.
Yes.
Phil Frame.
Yes.
Bud Brown.
Yes.
Marcus Jones.
Yes.
Kristen Kilgore.
Yes.
Cujo.
Yes.
Jay Lemon.
Yes.
Caleb McCaleb.
Yes.
Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
Josh Moore.
Yes.
Todd Olberdine.
Yes.
Craig Perry.
Yes.
Brandon Rader.
Yes.
Jill Raines. Janelle Randall is absent. Richard Wright.
Yes.
Michelle Schaefer.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Kristen Strecker.
Yes.
Brett Town. Clint Thompson.
Yes.
Hardy Watkins.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Congratulations. Thank you, everybody, for your effort. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we will finish the list, hopefully, God willing. I will say, as an aside, I know some people would have rather we pick the projects and then the money, so thank you for being gracious that allowed us to do it that way. I don't know, as we said, there's a right or wrong way, but some of you probably had a strong conviction we should have done it the other way around, so thank you for your patience and participation in that. I think Sean's the only one we're missing, so we'll give him. So, let's go ahead and start. It's not like we're going to say anything in 10 seconds. So our next agenda item is item number 4, discussion and consideration of a final project list to be presented to City Council recommending projects for a potential general obligation bond election. As I think Richard clarified a few minutes ago, I think inherent in the identification of this list is the identification of what amount of funds, percentage, maybe by category, but nonetheless will be unidentified or unattached to a specific project. So those are the two charges with this agenda item. What does the list look like, and what percentage will not be identified by a project? So we have a project list that's in front of us. There's a little bit of discussion, of course, on the last agenda item necessarily for that. And so we have a list that we worked on from last week. It got tweaked a little bit here tonight. Can everybody at least, does everybody know what the boxes are checked that we have on our list right now? Is there clear understanding on that? Or okay, I just want to make sure we all are on the same page, and then I will just entertain discussion about items that you would like to be on there that are not, or items that you don't like on there that are. So, Bud, yes?
Could we look at the map to show where?
Yeah, thanks, Bud, great question. Jane, thank you for being so incredible at this.
I guess there's no way to show what we've.
Checked.
Well, are these the ones that are checked, or these are all of them?
This is everything.
That's everything, so, yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
We do have it by ward on that. That's the closest we can get as far as location on the, so if you go back to the spreadsheet, you've got that on the right side, the distribution of projects by ward.
Okay.
Now, when a final list is agreed upon, we'll go in and edit that map to just have those projects, take out everything else.
So, does that say 7, 6, 6, 9, and 1?
Yes.
Yes. All right, we can go back to the ward map so everybody can understand the geographical size of the ward to the east. So that one right there that's outlined roughly in mustard yellow, that obviously is substantial in size. Number 1, of course, is not of course. One's in the middle right there where the cursor is. Thank you.
There's 7 projects that are, that's almost all of them that are listed.
Is that what you just say that again, Bud? I didn't hear you.
I mean, if you count them, that's almost almost all of them that are even in that box.
The ones that are in Ward 1?
Ward 1.
Or almost all the ones that were on the list to start with, or any, yeah, thank you for that.
The only thing I would say about Ward 2 is, and specifically northeast area, I can't remember seeing any projects on our list that were in that area, and I didn't ask to have this added, but it's continued to stay on my mind. Around Redbud Elementary always seems to come up the first couple of weeks of school. And really backs up. And so it would just be an open-ended question. I don't know if this might be something to request to add, but if there's some, maybe not a complete intersection redo there, but are there some improvements, some turning lane or two, some scabbing that might be able to be done for not a ton of money?
Josh, if I could chime in, maybe.
Yeah.
Anything that's adjacent to a school that the city has some additional unallocated money on, that I think we're saying the same thing, but Redbud comes to mind.
But if it was listed, and I'm kind of both ways, I love what's not allocated and how that can be used. I'm also thinking as part of a campaign, to, selling a campaign, and it was the other item. Sidewalks. When I was a council member, we'd fill in $1,500 worth of the sidewalk gap, and it was like the most popular thing in town for a month. And so that's why I added. That's why I added sidewalks to the list too, because I know it would be very popular for a campaign. I don't have any. I do have some that can be done, but it would be citywide. In my mind, the engineering would pick, But anyway, Redbud, that's one that I would, if we're looking at Ward 2 and further northeast, that's a spot that jumps out at me. And what is that intersection? It would be Douglas and Coffee Creek.
Yeah, we only have 2 road projects really on the list. One that was selected, which is the Cobell I-35.
Right.
And the other one that's on here is the Danforth and Sooner. Really, there's 2 road projects and more too.
Yeah.
That have been top on the list.
But you've got a lot of overlay out here.
Yeah.
True.
There is a lot of.
True, with the county.
Yes.
Todd?
I was just going to ask Steve whether or not, when we talk about street overlay and reconstruction, is it too far of a reach to say that that also includes sidewalks? I mean, it's part of that process?
So anywhere that we do resurfacing where there's existing sidewalks, we have to bring those up to code. ADA, everything else, we have to make sure that they don't have sharp hazards or anything else like that.
So it is part of that work?
Where we have existing sidewalks, yes.
But not filling in a gap.
Not filling in gaps, right.
I think, Alan, we may want to, if you did a sidewalks project, it might have to be its own proposition. And those are typically built on easements, I think, and not on fee title owned property. If they're adjacent to a street, it's one thing, like you're doing a street project.
Yeah, the ones that get it right away.
That's one thing, but it just gets to be kind of complicated from a proposition standpoint.
Having said that, we can look at that a little more if you were wanting to add sidewalks along existing streets. Kind of got this idea that if you're taking people off the street by virtue of the sidewalk, that's kind of helps the flow of traffic.
Yeah.
But we would list where those sidewalks would be if we did that. I mean, if you decide to go that way, I want to think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a little trickier, but we might be able to get there.
And I wouldn't say, I mean, $1 million or $2 or $2 million in this case could really go a long way in, could get a lot done and looks really good, would look really good on a campaign. That's just all I'm saying, but I'm just throwing that out there for the group.
Thank you, Josh. I just want to mention kind of a last call for the list of items that are on the projects requested by task force members. You know, we're working from a list that is identified by staff and then this group over the last 3 weeks. These are the items that were on that list that were, I think most all were submitted at or after the very first meeting.
Those were all emailed to me.
Thank you, Casey. So, if anybody would like to kind of speak to these, I'm not trying to make short shrift of them, but I want us to stay with what our package of projects is, unless there are additions. So these would be in that unless there are additions category. So, to that, does anybody want to speak to that? Include them on our consideration list, or period, question mark?
Can someone explain the pickleball, what their thoughts?
Please.
That was mine. It was strictly for marketing, because I think there's a pretty zealous pickleball crowd around. And if you had a $5 million improvement to a pickleball facility or something, I don't know if that's identified enough, but I think it brings you a lot of folks to start again.
When we were planning the tennis facility, we have some property on the north end, which at the time we were conceptualizing that might be pickleball courts in the future.
But that's all that is. So I don't have a plan. I have a desire to afford as many votes as possible.
There you go.
Horror, okay, thank you. I thought that's what you said. Brad, can you give us an update on pickleball? And I know there's some changes to that dynamic, and then Marcus has a question, so.
It's my favorite thing to talk about.
You're welcome, then.
Yeah, I would say most pickleball is located at Kingsburg. We just put in fully converted 12 outdoor, or they were 3, but 12 outdoor pickleball courts lighted. We're loving them. And then we're working on getting the indoor facility rebuilt. That clubhouse that we refurbished. So there'll be 24 courts, 12 indoor. I would say that's pretty unprecedented, the indoor courts in particular for a municipality to offer that. So right now, I think if we get those things done, they'll be pretty happy with that. I totally understand the comment. If we were to put X amount of dollars into pickleball, I don't know where, that would be, I'd be really careful where you put those, because there is a noise component with it. So I don't know if we're ready to say like it would go in this park or in this place.
What uncommon ground is putting pickleball courts in on the master plan?
I don't know if it is or isn't in there.
Marcus, you had a question?
Well, I was just going to say that I put the Kelly and Coffee Creek thing just because Kelly kind of narrows down north of Covell, and then it widens back out kind of in front across Timbers, and so I just kind of put that on there. But traffic, they improved that intersection recently, and traffic seems to flow a little better now through there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Jay.
I request, and will move if necessary, that a citizens oversight committee be a part of the bond, be presented to voters. I think that goes here rather than next, because it just says recommendations and action. I wanted something more than a recommendation.
So, agenda item number 5 says discussion and consideration of additional recommendations and presentation to the city council. And you're saying you have a comment that you want to be a contingency or requirement as opposed to just a recommendation as an implementation of the package?
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to figure out where that fits.
Well, I think that would go with number 5. That's why we put that item there, because it's outside of what we're specifically talking. This is the project list, so that would go with number 5. And regardless of whatever you guys vote on, it is all a recommendation of city council. Whether you say it's a requirement or not, it's still a recommendation. They have the final say on all of these.
Thank you. I want to be sensitive to Jay's conviction about it, but I also want to be formally about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would go on item 5.
Okay, thank you, Casey. Right now, we're trying to discuss with a little bit of finality the list of items that are on the projects requested by task force members. Sounds like we kind of addressed a question related to pickleball. Marcus made a comment related to Kelly widening. The only other one that has much specificity is the Kelly Center lane addition between 2nd and 15th. I don't know if that's the idea, kind of like it is from 15th to 33rd, we have large medians, or what the idea is on that item. You might want to speak.
That one was mine also, and that's kind of what the idea was.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. You want to speak any more to that? No. Okay. No, it's great. No, I think the request for the comments and input was valid, and I appreciate everybody's time and thoughtfulness.
I just wanted to make sure that staff looked into, it, and if they would have found something that would have been more beneficial, then maybe so.
Thank you.
Maybe they would have addressed it.
Okay. Does anybody have a strong conviction or desire to move any of these items up into the list that has dollar amounts fine?
I would like, I have a question. Josh, you were talking about $1 to $2 million allocated to sidewalks. And I can definitely see that there's a lot of areas that we could benefit the sidewalks. How much sidewalk can you get for $1 or $2 million for a sidewalk? Like how many miles? Yeah. Do you know, just a ballpark? I don't know.
Less than you would think. I'll say that.
Okay. I knew that. But like for instance, I live Kelly and Sorghum area. There's no sidewalk connecting Mitch Park. But we're really close to Mitch Park. So if you go to Mitch Park, you either have to drive there or you have to risk your life on the side of the road, right? Right. So that's about a mile, just over a mile of roadway or of sidewalk non-existent.
Yeah, so if you're looking at an area that's kind of rural like that, you've got to factor in us buying the right of way to put the sidewalk there. Because generally it's just bar ditches and no flat space, and so we actually have to buy property to do it. So it gets really expensive really fast.
In that case, there's no bar ditches where you can put it in front of Belmont Farms, it's pretty flat. They mow it straight. So like an area like that, how much do you think if it's just a flat area?
Like $50 a square yard. So
so 1 to 2 million isn't really that big of a, like it's not gonna be a game changer if we put $1 to $2 million in it. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
So I think right now we spend, I think, what do you remember how much we spend
over $1 million a mile
every year.
Okay, that's kind of what I was looking for.
Over $1 million a mile if there's not a whole bunch of strings attached, like right-of-way utilities or garages.
One example is from Thornbrook to 33rd and Bryant. There's no sidewalk on that side to walk to the intersection to get to Cimarron Middle School. It never got put in. And so kids cross the street to cross 33rd Street to get to the other side where there is a sidewalk. It's been asked for several years. So I wouldn't say it's miles in any particular area. It's 500 or 600 feet of maybe 10 or 15 different areas. It's more what I've experienced where the needs are at in relation to this.
I think that number is pretty good though, quarter of a million for about a mile or so. I just think that it might be a good thing to put $1 or $2 million in.
And it's really needed. It really is needed.
Can you add sidewalk to some of this scope without having to make it a separate proposition?
I know that Oklahoma City has done that on street projects, and even on their resurfacing, they've tried to add like at least a sidewalk on one side of the street. So I think there's some precedent there, and Alan is the lawyer here, not me. But I think that what he's talking about are like these missing pieces, these missing stretches where you're not going to do a street project. And that gets to be a lot more complicated because in my past experience, we need to identify all the locations, and it would probably have to be, it could maybe even have to be like a gold bond proposition, like a separate, what is that? I mean, I just don't know without really thinking about it and looking at it more. Another alternative might be for you all to think about putting some money in your CIP that's funded with sales tax dollars and doing some of these missing pieces of sidewalk that way. It might be easier for you, like legally, to implement.
So, I mean, to that point, I spoke earlier, the things that were checked, you all left your last meeting, freed up $13.5 million of budgeted funds in the CIP. So if that would be, and there is an oversight route to that, so potentially that could be something that's vetted through that process.
I mean, that could be one of your other recommendations, that be considered by this other CIP oversight group or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to give you an alternative that doesn't necessarily put it in the bond issue. But I do think that for your street projects, we should look at whether or not they include sidewalks.
Jay?
One last question for you or Alan. In our first meeting, we talked about the possibility of going out and buying right-of-way on identified corridors before the price of land keeps getting more expensive. Did we decide that was not really a good function of bond?
Well, I might address this as, I would say this is as much a political question as anything, but I think we might be able to get there. The problem is we're talking about dollars down the road in areas that haven't been developed yet. And I think you're going to have a hard time getting people excited about, my street is not fixed where I live, but I want to spend money for a street. I just think you're going to get more bang for your buck. I think from a business standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world. We can buy cheap now before the development happens. I'm afraid you're going to have a hard time generating much excitement about that. I'm getting to your wheelhouse. But again, could we do it? I think we could. It's part of a street improvement. I think we can get there. It's not what you want.
Very good.
Yes.
Point of clarification. So you guys did great work last week, and you have this really awesome list that I get to come in and enjoy looking at and saying, yeah, I support that. My question is that pretty agreed upon, number one? And number two, did we add a project tonight and move it over there in the first discussion? And so we're at a certain place. You're making sure that we're looking at everything that's been brought up, and we also have a resident that has brought up an important project that was kind of addressed earlier. Just clarification for me of kind of exactly where we are would help.
Yeah, I think we kind of generally do that. So here's how I would characterize, and as I said at the very first meeting, if I say it wrong, correct me, please, as you did earlier when I messed up the village. So my sense of how we left it last Tuesday night was there was a lot of input, a lot of dialogue. There just wasn't the stomach to go over the top and finish it from the list. So everybody want to take a breath, think about their list, talk to their friends, family, elected officials, and come back with a fresh set of eyes and a little bit of energy tonight to this list. Since that time, we've removed a significant project at Covell and Penn. We have eliminated the splash pad and put a dollar amount related to that in neighborhood park projects in the tune of all 4 million, I can't see it.
Yes.
All 4 million. I believe we checked a box a few minutes ago before our break to add Covell and Santa Fe to the list. And are there other changes we made since last Tuesday night? Okay, so then, Hardy, that's a great question. I appreciate you resetting this. So if I can ask Jane to slide us over to our total and enlarge it for those of us who are confessing we can't see it. So that is the number, 193 million and change of the identified projects that are box checked. Includes one fire station and includes the Veterans Memorial, includes those items that we worked through, plus the collaboration tonight. Kristen Kilgore made a comment before we took a break about her opinion of the perception or the percentage allocation of streets versus parks versus fire. Clint asked me a question on the break about fire, so I want to bring those two back up because in light of that, the idea of Coltrane and Covell keeps percolating in this dialogue. And so I want us to speak frankly, but I also want to identify the things that were discussed. Chief Goodwin, would you mind speaking to the fire station adequacy or inadequacy of 1 versus 2 versus what started as 3 and give us any insight? This is Chief Chris Goodwin. He's spoken to us before. Chris, do you want to offer any insight?
Sure. There's no doubt that the fire station you all have included is our most pressing need. That's the one we really need to do. I'll be frank on the other ones. We can wait. We have some time behind us. Station 1 is a very old station, but we have renovated it twice over the years, put some significant amount of money into it. So should we choose to go to a future bond project, this would be a project that we could put on that. I understand the job that you all have before you. We're not trying to compete one way or the other. When we need fire stations, I know we're going to be provided fire stations. So I could be happy either way, but certainly fire station 3 is our biggest priority.
Clint, do you want to ask any questions, or whoever asked me about that? Anybody have any questions for Chief Goodwin?
Well, I just said something at the beginning, that we need both fire stations. Because public safety, for one, is a big thing. People drive by and see new police fire departments, like the one down on 33rd Street. So that's just my point of view about that, because unless you've been here, you don't know what they go through, and they need the best facilities they can have. I know they could be pushed down the road, but if we are here now, there's no guarantee there'll be another one. So if we get this one through, if we put the funding, it's not all that much compared to the rest of these, that they could have fire station number 1 taken care of as well.
Thank you for your input. I appreciate that. Other comments on our list and the items that are outstanding? Yes, Joe, please.
So I don't have a dog in the fight, but I'd ask us to maybe consider some of the projects next to UCO. I don't know that the student population, you know, some of them live here, some of them are registered to vote or not, but that's a pretty large community in there. So there are 2 projects on the list for like a bike lane and some improvements over the Godfrey. You know, one's for like $1 million, the other's for $3 million, so it's like a $4 million ad, but it seems like that would get that whole area of town on board with bike lanes, safer crossings and everything.
You have a specific, there was the Garland Godfrey one. And
yeah, that's the one for $1 million.
Is that the one you're speaking of?
Yeah, that's right above that North University Drive retrofit pedestrian infrastructure is about $3 million. So those are $4 million for, could be good bang for the buck projects.
So that 2nd Street and Garland Godfrey is going into Fink Park, basically, for UCO. Is that crossing right there?
I think that's where they briefed us up last week. Yeah, somebody was a fatality there, like a year or 2 there on the crossing.
How much is that?
So that's $1 million. That has the $3 million project for the bike lane, pedestrian crossing, all that.
And you can check that box if you like, but I would ask you to slide back over so we can see what we have on the list and what's remained as unidentified after you check that box. So you check that box for $1 million just as the discussion is happening. And so can you enlarge that, the middle one? Please.
Okay. I can't really see that, but yeah. Sorry. It's second, the improvements is second in Boulevard to make this list.
Yes, sir. It's number 6 on this list.
Okay. All right. I thought that was important.
So, Jane, we go back over there, please.
Was I just checking 2nd and Garland, or was I also checking North University?
I believe, well, I'm sorry, I asked you I just want to see the pie chart. So you've checked 2nd and Garland Godfrey, which is the cross into Fink Park, south of UCO. I mean, the other one's $3 million. You can do the math in our head, but would you? Yes. And again, this is just keeping us updated, right? So the list that has been checked, and we can go back over and read through it if anybody's concerned about what's on there or not on there. I think that's probably a good idea anyway. That would leave 15% of the $231 million that's connected to the project. Yes, Brandon Rader.
Just based on national averages with the university, there's probably 7,000 to 8,000 votes that are going to be coming out of the university.
Seems I trust you. Whatever you think. Can we go back now, Jane, and make sure everybody sees what's on the list? And if you'd leave it that size, that'd be fantastic.
I've always seen check marks too.
So yeah, the ones that have check marks are the ones that currently, yes, Jennifer, I'll give you 1 second.
Okay.
But those items are the ones that make up the number that right now would, if you did all of them, would have a 15% unidentified or unrestricted out of the 231 million. So you can see the 12 in a row at the top. You see Cobell and Santa Fe that was added tonight, 2nd Street and Garland Godfrey that was just clicked. And would you scroll down, please? And then This is the Coltrane widening. Remember, that's the first several hundred feet that gets you to the Huntwick addition off of 2nd Street. And then the Quality Life Mitch Park, Neighborhood Park Playground, which got added to tonight by $4 million. Brad showed us a list of 20, or told us he had a list of 20 parks. Creek Bend Trail, we talked about that last week. That is not necessarily in the core property. It's not in the core property, but it completes the trail that is around Integris and that connectivity. We eliminated tonight, just unchecked the box of splash pad. And then the pump park, or the mountain bike park, is what that is, new park at Post Road and 2nd Street. The $10 million that's on that item for the Lake Soccer Complex, $8 million for the Veterans Memorial, and then the fire station number 3, which was a $9 million item. So I just want everybody to kind of reset what's on the list, since we kind of bounced around a little bit. Jennifer, you had a comment or question?
I did. The Covell and Western intersection up at the top, how much is it? I thought they lowered it to $5 million.
It's 12 on our sheet.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, it's 12.
We did lower it, but it was from 22 million to 12 million.
We did that, I think, after the second meeting.
Okay.
12,288.
Todd? Yes, sir. If you're going to do the improvements on Coltrane north of 2nd, why wouldn't you go ahead and do the improvements on the south side of South Coltrane?
Well, I think I'll remind everybody of the discussion, but it's not necessarily an answer. The discussion was there weren't any other funds to complete the infrastructure improvements to get into the Uncommon Ground Sculpture Park. And it's an item that it's a contingency of the deal when funds are available. And I don't believe there was a lot of discussion south of 2nd Street going past 7-Eleven back down towards 15th. I don't remember, Steve.
So if you're talking about the 2 blocks that randomly go from 4 lanes.
In front of the Get Baked, I think is the name of the place.
Yeah, we're already addressing that. That came up during a public discussion for Uncommon Ground, so we're already getting that addressed separately.
So they have funding for that.
We have funding for it.
Oh, okay. Cool. Good.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Yes, Brandon Rader.
I think we should include the North University Drive right away, one for the university, but also downtown Edmond's going to look very different in 10 years, and that's an economic driver for our sales tax as well.
Can whoever the staff, I guess, probably Steve, there was improvements to North University a few years ago, added the bike lane, kind of changed that whole feel for that area. What does this, I mean, we can look at our project list, but can you give us a summary of that?
I mean, so, you want to pull it up on the map? That might be the easiest way. So this project came out of the Edmond Shift program, and
Sorry, a bike lane there. There's a nice sidewalk.
You said this is the easiest way to look at it?
There's no picture.
All right, Steve, you're on. Steve, you want
Ken, you want to do this one?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Ken Ryan, Director of Planning. I was the project manager for the Edmond Shift Long Range Mobility Plan. The project along University was envisioned as a retrofit. You know, if you're familiar with that corridor now, I believe it's kind of a very old sidewalk on each side. Very small bike lane. It's basically the gutter. 2 oversized travel lanes and a very wide turn lane that there's not a lot of driveway access on. So there's an opportunity to increase the functionality of that roadway so that it supports adjacent land use, especially on the west side of University, to do some things that are supportive of UCO in terms of, you know, you might think about a campus corner or a significant change in the land use there. There's a lot of surface parking and those kinds of things. So the city's responsibility for a project like that would be to revise that roadway and make it easier to move across and up and down on scooters and bikes and walking and running and all of those things. So.
That'll take us down about 12% or so.
Okay, Chris, Jamie, check that box and tell us what our percentage is, please.
Yeah, are we trying to reduce the contingency right now?
I'm not trying to do anything except, I'm sorry, Kristen. What my goal is in this few minutes of our discussion is to identify anything and everything that people think should be considered for inclusion. Yeah, I'm not trying to get to a contingency number. I think that's getting ready to happen. But what I was trying to do is eliminate anything else except the items for consideration of a check by them.
Mr. Chair, technically, we're at 15%.
Okay, thank you. And Brett was saying that. So that was, Kristen, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to, if you will, kind of condense our discussion to just the items that are now checked. We've now cut it in half or something. Some of them have been a layup because they've been on there since the beginning. Others have been added. And then now, unless someone wants to check another box that's not, I want to discuss the projects you may want to convictedly leave and how that impacts your contingency or the unlisted funds. That's my goal. Thank you.
Confessing I can't see the screen. I mean, have we left unidentified 15% of the overall, not 15% of each category? Because we haven't decided.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't think we have that broken down by category. Yeah.
So again, we're going to have to get back to the point where we're at least 30% in each category, at least 70%.
Yeah, and so I guess that'd be the quick question. We want someone to tell us if we're out of line in any of the three categories in excess of 30%. We probably want to figure that out pretty quickly. Yes, Josh?
I would propose 30% for streets, for sure. Absolutely. And then go from there.
So we'd be, I guess that's the question, do we add 30% to that 127.5, or are we taking 30% out of the 127.5?
Yeah, 30%, yeah, 127.5.
So that would add to the budget.
Then you'll unlist.
Yeah.
You'll unlist
what is that max out?
$36 million worth of projects.
Okay.
Or you take that number times 1.3 is a big.
Yeah, I mean, when I made my list, I was like taking the 127 and 15, and adding 15% to that to come up with the total for streets. So that you see the 33,521 is remaining. You basically allocate that.
2 streets.
Well, you're going to need a little bit of unlisted money in parks and fire. I mean, I would not leave them completely
I don't think you could do 30% unlisted on streets without taking some money out of your park. Or fire.
Or take some street projects off.
You either have to reduce street projects or park projects.
So, Josh, I appreciate that. Let's slide back over, if we could, at our. We were just identifying. Josh had a suggestion of having a 30% contingency on your street number. The street number is 123 million, so that's a big number, and you have to get rid of projects. So maybe we will, or you would need to impact the other two categories. So,
well, Mr. Chairman, do you really have to get rid of them, or you're just not listing them on the bond?
Well, I think we'd be in excess of 231.
Well, I mean, but they're in the priority list. You just don't list them on the bond, and then those actually become your contingency.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, you would eliminate them as listed, as checked, and so then that, I guess, part of the idea of listing them on the bond is that you're ensuring the voters are going to be done. I think.
Yes.
What I'm saying. So I hear what you're saying. So yeah, if you want to leave your budget the number the same, then you just have an understanding, I guess, that you think they're going to be done, which I don't, is kind of problematic. Marcus, sorry, Christian.
I think we kind of already patched this when I asked that question. I don't think you can guarantee that something will come up and the contingency used for something else. So I wouldn't bank on not putting something on the list expecting it to get done.
Todd, did you have a question underneath the big question?
I was just going to say that 30% of the rules is going to take us over what our.
Okay, I heard you over there. Okay, thank you. So, it's not a Rubik's Cube here, but here's the idea that we're struggling with right now, and it's going to just take some thought, is The idea of the road budget right now is 123 million. That's the number, I think. 127, thank you. It wasn't before you added the UCO stuff. And then 61 million for parks and 9 million, of course, for the one fire station. So the idea of contingency, if you had a number, then we're going to move things around from a standpoint and want to keep those things identified, as Bud just pointed out. There's an interrelationship there that is pretty relevant. Josh?
Well, you could, you could start breaking down the 33.5 million in percentages. And thought, just throwing this out there, 50% of the, well, I don't think this will be needed that much for fire, but you could go like 50% of the 33.5 million for streets, then 25% for parks, 25% for the fire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you'd be, it looks like your number's closer to 2/3.
It doesn't come out quite right.
Yeah.
But yeah, for fire, a 20% contingency on $9 million is $8 million.
Yeah, I'm not
you
saying
could just
that.
round it, you could just make it, and you might want to just kind of leave this to your bond counsel and your staff a little bit. But, make fire a $1.5 million unlisted number and just, or $1 million unlisted number. And so then you've got, that frees up a little bit proportionately for streets.
So if you said something like that, just as an idea, and you had your fire at $1 million and you did 20% for parks, that'd be 12.2 million, that's 13 million. You have $20 million for your streets, which would be roughly 15%, right? And that's not the number you're saying, Josh, but that would be 15, 20, and you can flip those to move your dollars around and leave $1 million for the fire. I think if you looked at it that way, Todd, I see you. And so, I don't know, just if you, like Josh, I think was saying, if you took your 33 million and you allocated it, admittedly, we're talking about arbitrary methods right now, but you allocated it because either your streets are already 2/3 of your overall budget, so you took 2/3 of that, 21 million, put it by the streets, and then put the balance with parks and the fire, and you'd have a number to at least look at. And then back into your percentage. Alan, Todd had a question, and then Alan.
Well, I was just playing with some numbers there, and if you put in a 21% contingency for the streets and 10% contingency for parks and 10% for the fire, that gets you within $200 of what our current contingency is for showing there of 14.51%.
Can you say those numbers again?
Well, again, these are all fluid, of course, but theoretically, if you set aside 21% for the streets, which works out to about 26,770, 10%.
What, 26 million?
I'm sorry, 26 million. Say 27 million, rounding off. It provides about 6 million for parks, and it provides $900,000 for the fire station.
That gets you just over 231.
Yeah, it gets you to 33,770, and our current contingency is 33,521, so it's within a couple $100.
I was looking at some 153 million for roads, 72 million for parks, 2 million for fire, that gets you 231.
Will you say that out loud again, please?
153 million for roads, 72 million for parks, 10 million for fire, gets you 231.
And of that, so if you, not that we're trying to, it's not a calculus question, but it kind of is. So you've got 153 minus the 127 you have identified. You're right. And likewise, 72 million of the 61 million you have identified, which is more like 15% for parks. And then 10 for the 9 that's identified by the fire. That is how you came up to, I mean, it's a map of the contingency built into the number. Okay. Now keep in mind,
round numbers are better than
thank you very much. We still have a list, and I don't want anybody to think that they're not going to have a chance to speak if they're really frustrated that something is on the list and they don't want it, or anything else. I think we've kind of exhausted the idea of adding things to the list by checking boxes. That's my observation. If someone feels differently, please please speak.
I was looking at my wrong column, 150, 70, and 11.
Say that again.
I was looking at my wrong, a different column, 150 million, 70 million, and I had 11 million originally, but you can play with those numbers.
Yeah.
But really, we need to come up with some round numbers and go down the road. You're never going to get it exactly 15% for each of them. It's going to be pretty difficult.
So,
for one, the 9 million will be out of whack.
Yeah. So 231, I mean, I see what you said, 150 and 70 is 220, 11 gets you to 231. Okay, I get it. So does anybody want to discuss and have comments regarding the list of items that are on the project list that you feel like you have an opinion about, you want to share and talk about? Or is there starting to be a consensus as to that list?
I like the list.
Thank you, Jill. Richard, then Michelle. I like it.
There's a point Kristen made earlier. I just feel like there's too much weighted in parks. If it's roads we want, that's just a big number for parks. And I think just the perception out there, not that I'm against quality of life, trust me, I'm all for it, but roads is what people want. And just that, what is that, about a third of our budget is for parks. And I just think that's weighted too heavily in that area versus what people have said they want.
Okay. Thank you. Michelle, then Marcus and Jennifer.
At this point, I think you gotta have some sparkly stuff in there, just to bring some people out and make them emotionally connected. And then I'm sad we can't do anything with Covell and Coltrane, but it's just such a big bite. I don't think we could do that, so.
I will just mention that Brian Blundell asked me to say is he believes there's a strong voter with 10 million for the park, for the soccer, and 25 million at Mitch Park. And so that's 35 million, you're 61. If you added the Veterans Memorial in there, you're well past 3 projects knocking out 65% of that number, which appear to be very soft targets when it comes to support. And I'll just say that on behalf of Brian.
Sure.
Mention Marcus. And
well, I was going to kind of echo what they were saying. I was going to wonder about the 25 million for Mitch Park. Is that seems like a very high number when we could have had an outdoor thing that was 25 million, or not outdoor, but
give us an outdoor sports complex.
Yeah, outdoor sports complex for 25 million. Is there any way of getting that number at Mitch Park down a little bit, and maybe we could put a little bit more money towards roads?
I guess I'd ask Brad to speak to how they came up with the number for Mitch Park, if we could.
Sure, I think it's a possibility too. Mitch Park, a big chunk of that are the ball fields. There, the school district also uses the ball fields. There's 9 fields there, and it was just one thing we know. We're doing AC Hacklinger, and it's $17.5 million to do 10 fields there, so that eats up a large chunk. There's amenities. Some of it's based on we're going to be implementing or starting a master plan process, knowing it's going to identify projects, but it could come down, and we would just be limited to that budget when we do. And that's true for all of our projects. It's not as cut and dry as a road, where it's like very quantity based, and this is what you have, and this is how much things you need to get there. It's like even with the playgrounds, you could spend $500,000 on a playground, or you can spend $100,000 on a playground. You get what you pay for. So I think there's flexibility in that number. Some of it was trying to catch everything that could come up in a master plan. Like we know there's access problems in Mitch Park. I think you brought up walking to Mitch Park. If you walk to Mitch Park, once you get into Mitch Park, it's a problem. There's no sidewalks or anything like that to get you to the Y or to the ball fields. So we don't have a solid number on that particular part of it. So there's a lot of contingency in there to try to capture everything that we think maybe you need.
And without those improvements, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, without those improvements, you're not going to get the economic development that we're looking for with to be a destination for sports. You can stand on one side of one field and someone else on the other, and all you can see is from the waist up, because those fields are like this. They're not really playable to a high standard. It just needs to be bulldozed and leveled and start over again, just to tell you the truth. We've looked at it for 20-some years.
I know, thank you, Brad. Sean had his hand up.
Yeah, so can we take
to Marcus's point, can we take this number and say, I'm all about Mitch Park, or I'm all for the soccer complex, but I don't think it should be 10 million, or I don't think it should be 25. Can we take some of those funds and move them into streets? Can we do that, or are these numbers from the city? Are they, you either do it for this amount or you don't do it?
I believe it's fair to say the numbers are what we determine. I guess my thought is, I've got a political science degree and a law degree, and I have no idea what the number is arbitrarily saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
People tend to spend what you give them, right?
Right.
And so, and I heard Jay say earlier about ODOT or OTA and the engineers and the people, but again, that suddenly it's a blank check without any accountability. When I look at Mitch Park personally, I mean, I think, for what Phil said, now my kids, it's been 20 years since they've been out there, but I want that place nuked and be like the #1 sports complex. I remember when I was on the chamber board 20 years ago, soccer, they had the Snickers Regional Soccer Tournament, and it was like a $20,000 ask by the chamber. It was a massive impact to our economy. And so, I don't know, and I don't know, if I said what I said has any intellectual integrity to it, then I'd have to say, I don't know if making it 25 million or 27 or 18, because I already said I don't know. But I think the answer is yes, you can move it however the group wants to move it.
Yeah, and I think the reason I asked that question is I'm specifically thinking about the soccer field. And I love that soccer field. My kids grew up there. And last week I heard that there was one tournament that reflected $7.5 million worth of economic boom for the city. Just because people came here and they stayed and they bought things. And so every ballpark that I go to has a sponsor. So have we considered private funds for that? Have we considered, you just mentioned the Snickers regionals, right? Have we thought about, well, let's get Snickers to pay $5 million, then we can move $5 million out of that and put it into streets. And it doesn't affect the soccer complex, because the soccer complex is still getting the same amount of money. And I mean, nobody's going to sponsor the intersection of Cobell and, you know.
Well, there's PI law firms in mind. I don't know.
Somebody was right.
So, thank you. I think this, just to answer your question, and I don't mean to sound dismissive, I think the operational budget of the park is outside the scope of what we're talking about. You know what I mean? The idea, whether or not someone puts McBride Hospital on there or whatever. But I do trust Brad and his team, and Phil had a question or a comment, and then I think Clint, if I missed you, I apologize. Go, Phil.
Well, I think Sean's got good points. I don't know if anybody saw the article in the, whatever it's called, ICSC. Youth sports tourism is now $52 billion at the end of 2023. 16-something million was baseball, 14 million was soccer. We're capturing very little of any of that. So I think good point, Sean. I think the next part to that, I mean, we are recruiting somebody trying for indoor sports complex and things, but the big movement around the country in that is to find private developers to participate with. That's how Overland Park, Kansas is building phase 1, $260 million project. So good points, but I think those come second after we get this, after where it's at least feasible and we improve an inferior product, as Brett said. I mean, you can't, those kids have more guts than I do to put their nose down in front of a baseball or whatever, because that land is awful.
Thank you, both of you. Clint, Todd, and then Caleb. And then, but I apologize.
You know, we do have a lot of people moving to Edmond, and one of the main reasons they moved to Edmond is the schools. And the number 2 reason they moved to Edmond is the parks and the ball fields and the soccer fields for their children, because these people moving here do have children in school and stuff. So I think that we leave the Mitch Park figure alone, and the soccer field as well. I know for a fact that the Cope family in Wichita, Kansas, had their bodyguard bring their daughters down to play soccer in Edmond every week, 2 days a week. So I know that draws people outside the state into that soccer.
Thank you, Clint. Todd?
Well, I was just playing with some of the numbers and just kind of click where my stuff looks like is that
that right now 65% of the $231 million we're talking about is for roads, and 30% is for parks. So it really is not quite, 50%. It's 30% for parks and 60% for roads, and there's 5% for the fire station. So I don't think that that's a bad number. I don't think that's a bad ratio, and I think I like the idea of supporting the parks.
Is that like an unmarked?
Added in.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you, Caleb, and then Bud.
So that was going to be my point. 2/3 of our money's already going to streets.
Yes.
I mean, I think we leave it alone.
65%.
Thank you.
I think we're in a good place, and I think it's a real slippery slope if we start picking little dollars off here to add to there. We have professionals that do this for a living that can put together a budget and
So to Brett's question or his simplification, and this is probably a question for Alan as much as anybody, and I apologize, I think you've answered this so many times, but if the list contains the items we've identified, does the ballot item have a gross number, 150 million under streets and 70 million under parks and 11 million under fire? Using Brett's math.
That's your gross number, and then you identify specifically the 150 million streets, 127 million are identified.
Again, that's where Brett did a great takeoff of that number for us, I think, right? That's where we. Yes.
Probably, I mean, in the sense we're talking about one firefighting facility, we'll list all of that under that item, and basically refer to it as striking fire station and furnishing fixtures, replacement, that kind of things. If we're all under the firefighting facility, the other two, projects we have.
So is the unallocated amount specifically on the ballot, or is it up to the voter to figure out that 20 million of that is not allocated?
Typically what we'll do is we'll add up the amount and we'll put a little percentage next to it. The Attorney General, when they review this, that's one of the things they look at. So it'll add up the number and say percentage of total. But we don't shine a spotlight on it.
Yeah,
we got this much unallocated. We met the requirement, as long as that number adds up to at least 70%.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good question. Thank you, Richard.
But the other thing I was going to add was that we need to feel comfortable in the fact that those monies can only be used in those areas.
Yeah.
Roads.
Thank you, good comment.
They're not going to be used in any other way, so if they're not.
Well, so to that item, back to, this is obviously, maybe it's self-explanatory, but you have 127 million you've identified right now in that category, and under Brett's number, we're putting 150 million in there, right? Likewise, 61 million's been identified specifically, and we're putting 70 million in that category. We're asking the citizens to put 70 million, to be honest. And likewise, the 9 million for the fire station, and we're saying we could spend 11 million a week, and that's the only place you can spend it. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, I've got challenges with a lot of these projects. But overall, I think it's pretty good.
Dave's been setting us up for 4 meetings in 11 and a half hours. Okay, let me just mention a couple things. It's 8:15, and I would like to get a resolution on this, and I think we can. I appreciate the spirit of it. And if we do, I'm going to ask for about a 4-minute break, and then we're going to come back and discuss any recommendations to be added to our report to the city council. That's my preference, but.
Do we need to vote on this?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm just saying that's how I would like us to move. So with that in mind, is there any other, I'll entertain discussion or comments or motions?
So we vote on it.
Second.
All right, so are you saying that's a motion for this list of projects under the budget that we've talked about?
Sure. And that should be.
And the allocation.
And the allocation. So just so I'm clear, Clint's made a motion that we adopt this list of specific projects and the allocation total numbers that Brett has mentioned of 150 million for streets. 151 million for streets.
70 for parks, 10 million for fire. That's 231.
Okay. Is that your motion, Clint?
Yes, sir.
And seconded by Jill Raines. All right, any other discussion or comments related to this? All right, seeing no more discussion, I'm going to read a list of names and ask you to vote. You have no conviction. All right, please roll call vote on the motion by Clint and the second by Joe Raines for the numbers that we've identified by Brett. Does anybody have any questions about the motion or the item you're voting on? All right, thank you. Brian Blundell's absent. Jay Buxton.
Yes.
Sean Conrad.
Yes.
Phil Frame.
Yes.
Bud Graham.
Yes.
Marcus Jones.
Yes.
Kristen Kilgore.
Yes.
Cujo.
Yes.
Jay Lemon.
Yes.
Caleb McCaleb.
Yes.
Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
Josh Moore.
Yes.
Todd Olberdine.
Yes.
Craig Perry.
Yes.
Brandon Rader.
Yes.
Jill Raines. Janelle Randall's absent. Richard Wright.
Yes.
Michelle Schaefer.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Kristen Strecker.
Yes.
Brett Town.
Yes.
Clint Thompson.
Yes.
Artie Watkins.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Now it's unanimous with this list. Thank you for all of that. We've discussed several items that people would like to suggest. The Geo Bond Oversight Committee. I would like a 4-minute break and come back and list your suggestions. And keep in mind, the whole thing's a recommendation, so we're not going to have a lot of dialogue, I don't think, about. No, I'm not willing to tell them that. So that's the idea when we come back from a 4-minute break. Anybody have a problem? Okay, thank you. We have everybody. So item number 5 on our agenda, discussion and consideration of additional recommendations and presentation to City Council. And so in light of that, a couple questions for you, Casey.
Yes.
After we leave here tonight, assuming there's no other business, will this, one, are there minutes from tonight's meeting, and is there a method for those to be approved or not? And 2, is there a follow-up meeting related to the actual presentation prior to it being submitted to the city? So logistically.
The follow-up meeting of this group?
Yes, sir.
So, to your first question, if there is another follow-up meeting, you would approve those minutes there. If there's not, we've actually talked about this scenario. We would potentially have them approved at a city council meeting. City council would approve the minutes. Since otherwise, you would just keep coming back and approving minutes in perpetuity.
That was my comment. Well, we're looking at perpetuity, so.
Yes. So yes, that. If you all want to have another meeting to talk about your presentation, to go through it, you can do that. If not, if the group is comfortable with whomever you are selecting to move forward with that, and you don't need to meet, obviously I will continue to communicate with the group, send things out, continue to communicate with the chair, vice chair, whomever gets put in charge of that. That's really part of what you need to figure out in this.
Okay. And so and just remind everybody, when Casey communicates, you don't have a reply all options, you don't show the names.
It's all in blind copy, so you can't. So that keeps us safe.
Thank you. The presentation would involve Kathy, the objective information of what the group did, the recommendation of the millage rate, the time period, the list of projects, inherent in that is the unidentified or unattached funds, and then whatever is discussed. Now, are there other things that are required or expected for this group to communicate objectively to the council?
Not that I can think of. There'll be other items on the council's agenda at that meeting that they will have to vote on related to the election and approving bond propositions that go on the ballot, things like that.
I know there's been comments several times that there was, and I don't know exactly the method to do this, but the idea is to list items that people would like to be communicated to the council in addition to the objective facts and lists that we've identified tonight. The one thing that I've heard mentioned several times is some sort of a GeoBond oversight committee to be at some level involved in the management, administration, reporting to something of the funds that are identified in the bond. I've heard that several times. And so I'll just say, I think that seems to be one that's a recommendation, but again, I'm just telling you what I've heard and then we can discuss any other comments or affirmation of that. Anybody?
I think that's a good recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, similar to the sales tax with sizing and
okay.
how often they use that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, Todd?
Would you have to provide some sort of anticipated structure of how that oversight committee would work? Because, I mean, you could have one side would be a rubber stamp and the other side would be fairly involved in the process. And so I'm just wondering if the city council is going to be more inclined to have a rubber stamp approach, and some of us might be a little bit more inclined to be a little bit more involved in the details. So I don't know how you go about it.
Well, I think, yeah, I hear what you're saying, although I think there's some philosophy of thought that the council would like people that are not a rubber stamp because it gives them cover. So I think I could argue either side of that.
Right. I'm just wondering how much we have to put in the proposal or the information to the council. Not much.
Yeah, I don't think you need to get into the weeds of structure. I think it's just more of what you want to see and why.
Thank you. Someone over here, so Brett.
I would encourage as a part of this, once it passes, once the projects start, to get a project sign that says, "Thank you, citizens of Edmond, project paid for, project funded through," and do that on every freaking one of them. Second. It makes a difference. People know where their money is spent.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one comment?
Yes, please, Al.
Just so everybody understands where this goes from here, we're going to have a meeting at the city on Wednesday morning. All of the folks involved at the city level are going to be there. We're going to go through each of the projects, and we're going to try to create the verbiage that is going to be that description and that dollar amount for each of those projects. We're going to be as specific as we can so somebody knows what we're proposing to do with the money, but not so specific that we're going to box ourselves in with what we can't do. And we might get that right, we might get it wrong. Unfortunately, that plays itself out over time and the circumstances change. But that would be the process we'll go through. So you all will ultimately see this language. If it doesn't get circulated in the meantime, you're going to see it if you attend the city council meeting. Certainly you'll see it published in the paper. But the point being in all of that is that it's probably not going to be exactly the way everybody thinks in their own mind it might read. But we're going to do our best to capture kind of the thought process here. And again, the city staff is going to be there. They're hopefully going to be working night and day for the next 48 hours to get us to that point so we can start drafting these provisions. But that's kind of what happens from here. It gets put on paper and we go from there.
It's my understanding that the city council meeting where this will be reported on and maybe acted on is August 12th. Is that
correct? Yes. So for sure, the presentation will be August 12th. And then I think there's still determination that has to be made if they're going to vote August 12th or if they would need a special meeting. That still needs to be determined. But for sure, the presentation August 12th. And to what Alan said, I will continue to communicate everything that we have to you all as this process moves on. So as soon as language is finalized, you'll get it as soon as I get it to you.
So thank you, Sean. August 12th is an open regular city council meeting. I'd encourage you to attend that meeting for good reason, to show support for what you've done. And obviously there's citizens' comments that night. I mean, if you have a desire, I think we should all be refined on what's going to be presented. But August 12th, 5:30, it seems possible they'd have a special meeting, but their window's short because of the 75-day notice to the state election board. So they don't do it on the 12th, they're going to do it on the 19th, I think. So I would be shocked if, well, it seems like the 12th is like a number. Sean?
Do you feel like it's recommended that we present a communication plan to the city as well? Like because the city can't sell it to the voters. They can just tell the voters, here's what's on it. But who's going to tell the voters about the benefits and the values of all of this?
Facebook and talk to the Rotary clubs. And
yeah, but that's my question is should we include that in the presentation to the city?
I think the word they use is education, an education plan, and I would probably ask Brett for insight or input since he's been down that road a few dozen times, Kathy as well. But
yeah, we really just did the education part, except for a few of the last ones where we put out signs. And we didn't really have a group, about $500 worth of signs. Brad Reeser bought 500 and we put them out. That was our plan.
Kathy, you got to say
so typically, the city can provide public information, but they can't manage the campaign. So if there is a vote yes campaign, it will have to be carried out by an independent group separate, a private group separate from the city. And, I mean, there's discussions going on in the community about who that might be. I'm not sure, in my opinion, I don't think this group needs to make any recommendations to the council about that. I think that you might want to talk to your friends and neighbors about getting behind that kind of campaign and helping to fund it, but that would be a private activity, not a city activity. And the city has issued a request for proposals and has identified a marketing firm to help them with the public information piece.
So it'll be a branded campaign. It will be, say yes to streets or whatever.
We're assuming that somebody will have there will be a campaign that will be managed by a private group. And it'll be a vote yes campaign. Yeah.
I would add, do not underestimate the impact you individually have with your friends and neighbors. As you say, I've been involved in this. I know the answers to these questions. I support it. I've done it. But that grassroots goes a long way. Campaign.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Jay.
It is on the oversight. I think everybody's kind of nodding their heads, but as the city's oversight needs to be done. Do we need a separate oversight committee on this, or do we just dump it into capital improvement projects so we don't have another board? I like the idea of increased citizen participation, so it's a separate board. But I suppose CIP, if we did that, we could say like city council, oh, now we're public works, oh, now we're city council. I suppose they could do that, but this just seems awkward. So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So in most cities, capital improvement program is sales tax, use tax, property tax, geo bond tax. It's a number of different things. So the thought we're having is probably taking our existing capital improvement board, probably expanding that to provide more opportunities for more people to serve. Because your capital improvement plan is not specifically just a geo or sales tax, it's all the above. You could have a geo project that's also has sales tax to augment it, or hey, we have user fees to augment it, or we have a one-time grant. The idea to have separate boards managing all that, that'd be challenging. So the thought would be is to expand the utility of the capital improvement program board versus a CIP sales tax. That's the early thought process.
Thank you, Scott. The only two things I've written down in my notes are signage as to project funding, thanking the voters, and then the geo bond of some sort oversight committee. I do agree with Sean, and I've said it every time I've had a conversation with the city. I think they need to be very intentional about their education campaign. They've got a lot more money than us private guys do, and I would like them to spend it wisely, but I don't know that needs to be a recommendation. Surely that's expected and understood.
Shirley?
Yes, yeah. She's here again. I'll clear it. Glenn, yes.
In our previous meeting in the other room, I was talking about if we could make a recommendation or suggestion to the city that there is some excess funds that the park department, that they do make the splash pad number 3 realized. And then as far as the streets, it would be up to them. But I think the parks department, the splash pad number 3 would seem to be fairly passionate about people, and it's a good thing. And also for the street would be the additional sidewalks, link ups that it really needs. So, if they have the excess funds. I mean, there's going to be more people moving here, buying houses, more property tax and stuff, so I would guess that in the next 5 or 6 years, they'll have excess funds.
I'm looking at Alan, like I don't want to overstep. Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I don't want to overstep what we...
There's not much in the formal process we can do with that. I think maybe a footnote to the city council members that, at some future date, but it wouldn't be appropriate as part of the documentation.
Okay. Other comments?
Do we need a motion for those?
Well, it says consideration, doesn't it, Casey?
Yeah, especially if you're going to recommend board oversight, I would recommend you at least vote on that.
Okay. All right, so, yeah, just the two items I read. I heard what Clint said, I also heard what our council said, or one of the city council. So, discussion and consideration of additional recommendations and presentation to city council. The two that I identified were signage as to acknowledging and thanking those taxpayers for project funding, and a GO bond oversight committee to be appointed by council in some method or formula.
And with respect to the presentation of the council, can we add that we're recommending you to actually make the presentation?
I want to second that.
The chair.
I appreciate that. As I said the first night, I'm communicating what you said. I'm willing to do that. I get a chance every now and then to be up there. And so, and Richard offered to participate and help pull it together, and Jay, obviously the faithful person, so we can do that. No, I say we can. How about that?
Good job. Good job, Lee.
Yes, Richard.
I'd like to make a motion that we add, that we suggest that we have an oversight committee to be defined in the future based on city recommendations, city staff recommendations, to oversee the use of the tax dollars in the GO fund.
So you want to address the signage issue as part of that motion?
Can we do that?
Yeah.
And also to provide signage for any of the projects that we do, that if they are approved and consummated.
It's a motion by Richard. Do a second?
Second.
Sean or Brandon, I didn't hear a request, so. Sean, thank you. I have a list. All right. All right, any other discussion or comments related to that agenda item number 5? All right, we will vote. Brian Blundell is absent. Jay Buxton.
Yes.
Sean Conrad.
Yes.
Philip Frame.
Yes.
Bud Brown. Yes. Marcus Jones.
Yes.
Kristen Kilgore.
Yes.
Cujo. Yes. Jay Lemon.
Yes.
Caleb McCaleb.
Yes.
Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
Josh Moore.
Yes.
Todd Oberdeen.
Yes.
Craig Perry. Yes. Brandon Rader.
Yes.
Jill Raines. She just left, thank you, I saw her late. Janelle Randall's also absent. Richard Wright.
Yes.
Michelle Schaefer.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Kristen Strecker.
Yes.
Brett Town.
Yes.
Clint Thompson.
Yes.
Hardy Watkins.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. All right, thank you. Item number 6 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the General Obligation Bond Advisory Task Force. Remarks should be directed to the chair of the meeting and are limited to 3 minutes or less. Anybody have any? Yes, sir, please. So will you stand up and introduce yourself?
My name is Randy Jackson. I'm the gentleman that sent the email regarding the project at Santa Fe and Cobell. So I thank you all for your support on that. I'm so glad that I got added to the list. But just in hearing out the rest of the meeting, I picked up a couple of points that regarding, I know Ridge Park is already pretty settled, and some felt the budget was a little high on that. I think that's okay, but as far as some of the things that were mentioned in that bottom list of 7, I think, items that never made it up to the top, there was the pickleball, and there was a splash, I guess there was discussion about the splash park. But I've lived in 10 different cities. I was in the military or working with the military. And so I've noticed that all these cities have always taken advantage of corporate support. And Sean kind of stole a little bit of my thunder as far as the comment, but the Scissortail Park has their stages sponsored by Love's. I've seen the sign for Bob Mills skate park right here in Edmond. So I'm not sure what agency within the city, maybe that can be part of the commentary going up to them, but maybe that agency within the city needs to push, because some of these things that didn't get on the list could make the list. And there's another item that I've seen in other cities where the contractors, how much time?
You got a minute and 51 seconds. You're doing great.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I was a safety manager at DOD level, so I had to talk fast.
No.
But anyway, so another thing I saw in a lot of these different cities as far as support for infrastructure was from pushing it onto the developers, deep pockets of the developers. And if there's some of these streets like Cobell or Transport, where there's still a lot of empty land and there's going to be development, make them, pick up the tab on some of the infrastructure loading. One of the most extreme examples that I saw was where the Universal Studios over in California, they made them pay for a freeway off-ramp because it was going to overload the freeway off-ramps that were there for this new development they did. So said, yeah, sure. I mean, for corporate, the advertising is really expensive. And you know how much I pay for Super Bowl ads and stuff. I mean, I think a lot of these companies would be willing to pony up and that would take the load off the city. And the last thing I want to say is I've suffered through like 100 different federal level meetings, corporate, and we rarely got anything done. And oftentimes people are not nice to each other and things didn't go well. And here I can't believe how well we're just working together and how friendly it went. And you guys, in my opinion, from the citizens' perspective, it went great. I hope the city council was just as well.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being here 2 times. We'll put you down for a donation for the campaign. Any other citizen comments? All right, number 7, comments from members of the task force.
Thank you.
Good job.
Todd, you run a great meeting.
Oh, you're Well, I'll say what I think everybody would. Casey and the entire city of Edmond staff, it's rare that I don't try to recognize them. They're excellent at what they do. Casey fielded countless questions and structure issues, and Jane, your spreadsheet and your management of the internet was superior in every way, shape, or form.
And Katie's done a ton of work.
Yes, thank you very much. She actually put Cujo's name as Cujo on my list of names. Thank you all. I said at the very beginning, I was anxious about every part of it. I called Casey at most Mondays and said, I'm not sure how this is going to happen. It's y'all's authentic communication and commitment to wonderful dialogue, and I appreciate that. So thank you to the staff and to Jay. So anybody have anything else? All right. I think we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
I second.
Todd and...
Oh, yeah, I think it was Todd.
Okay.
All right, sorry. Kristen Strucker was the second one. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.